Historical Society meeting on March 16th in the year 2000, and we are having a tribute to Sally Gifford O'Brien.
A member of the president. And some of you may know these names. I was there when the Bush at Carter, Filipino flag, Blue Hawkins, Hoffman, Ferguson, Lamb, McEntee, Kennedy, Sally O'Brien, Ryan O'Neill, Ellen Marie. Well, Ellen Marie's been another consistent member. The Owens, I don't see them here tonight. I'm sorry I couldn't make it. Willard and the Fountains. Horace Romero, Tompkins, Weaver, Charles Kirk, I know he was president one time, Carol, Rushman, Lynch, Ocean, Davis, Cochran, Tommy, and then we know Edna Tilsley was a member of Kirk Place. I'm not sure when he came. How many, was there anyone here, I haven't mentioned who were members back in the 70s? Started in 1972. Then I looked a little further, and they had newsletters. I also know Sally. Sally, did you do all of these newsletters? Did you do all the newsletters from the beginning, or? No. Well, they started in January that year, and by March, they had a constitution. And the constitution mentions the starter and important material, writing and preservation, disseminating the material, and I thought that was truly what Sally has been doing over the past few years. And knowing that Barry Superi had been a trustee in the past, I asked him if he could come and say a few words. Very good. Mayor
I'm not so sure that anybody can say just a few words about this. She's done it all. I mean, this is a bittersweet job that I had here tonight. And we're all going to need to see her go for sure, for all she's done for this community. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to read the roundtable today. Well, never read it. You're right. There's a great article in there about Sally. I don't know if you haven't read it, make sure you do, because it just lists on and on about the things that she's done over the years. Just to name a few, I mean, I probably don't have to do this. You know more about it than I do. I know she's been a great supporter of mine. I know when Bill was alive, he was too. And they're both community-minded people. I'm sure going to miss him. You know, she's very active with the Needlework Guild. She's painted the logos on some of the fire trucks. She's done. I even think, didn't you do the one at the Village Hall on the gymnasium floor? You did the one with that? Where? Where was that? It says that she designed and stitched kneelers in St. Peter's Church, Grace Church in Milford, the tapestry in the Federated Church here. This goes on and on and on. Girl Scout leader. What can you say? We're going to miss you. We're going to miss that little SOB running around. Sally, I have a certificate of appreciation that was put together. I'd like to read to you and just present it to you. Maybe you can take it with you so you'll remember us and hopefully come back and see us once in a while. I envy you where you're going. It's a beautiful area today. It says Certificate of Appreciation for Sally Gifford O'Brien. In accordance with the first Constitution drawn up for the new Town of Washington Historical Society in March of 1973, Sally Gifford O'Brien has discovered and collected information to illustrate the history of the village of Milford. She has provided for the preservation of such material through her drawings and historical notes published in the Millbrook Story and Coloring Book, which you can see back there. Sally has further disseminated information and aroused interest and pride in the history of the area through her needlework. She made, with the help of others, the quilt hangings of the town, now located in the library. For these and other good works, the Village of Millbrook gives you the certificate of appreciation with thanks and our best wishes for your new life in North Carolina. I think it's supposed to be South Carolina. Hilton Head? Where are you going? Oh, Pinehurst. I thought it was Hilton Head. I'm sorry. Sorry, Dylan, you were right.
I thought Pinehurst was in South Carolina, but someone corrected me.
That's nice to know. They have some wonderful golf courses. Right. Do you? Good to know. Anyway, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here. I'm glad I was able to do it.
This might be a good time for you to come up so we can present this to you, and then we have a nice company share for you. Yeah, I think you'll have to.
Judy put this together, so you can really thank her. I appreciate that.
I'm so glad you
I'm going to just sit back and watch the rest.
Last year when my daughter was visiting, we stopped at Kevin's bottle shop at Hist in Washington College. And while she was looking at picture frames, I went to look at old photographs. I'm interested in those. And the first photograph I saw was a picture of my grandfather, studio portrait taken down in Camden, New Jersey. Well, I was quite amazed at this. And I came back to the shop again and told Kevin I was interested in old postcards. Well, I've learned that old postcards are not for sale. People who have them collect them, nobody sells them. And Kevin's very interested in the local history. And he has this fine private collection. And he told me, he kind of had a collection, I'd like to look at it. I looked upon a couple of my grandfathers, a bunch that I was surprised to find out my great-uncle Bert had published back in the early 1900s. And he said, take a little copy then if you want. And I thought this was so fun, and I did. Well, we're going to have another little bit of kindness tonight because Kevin is presenting something to the Historical Society that I know he's loved to own himself. I'm going to let him get up and tell us about what he's presenting and how it came about.
Well, I'm Kevin DeMartine and have an antique shop, so Friday and Saturday mornings are typically spent running around to yard sales or previewing auctions. And the morning of June 26th was no different. It was a Saturday morning, and the night before I'd go to bed, I looked at the newspaper and I more or less tracked out a route that I figured I'd take the next morning. And I saw there was going to be a yard sale over here at Millbrook Commons, and there was going to be another yard sale over at Millbrook School. And I'd heard there was a yard sale on 44 someplace on Friday that I had missed. I had gone to some other sales, and I said, maybe I'll catch up when I'm on the way home. So got in my car about 8 o'clock in the morning. I rode over to Millbrook Commons, and they always have a community yard sale there, and I picked up a few things, and I went out to the road and drove what seemed to be an eternity, like 3 or 4 miles, and finally came across this house, and there was a wagon wheel I managed to pick up, and then I went over to Millbrook School and picked up a few more things. And the next thing I knew, it was getting to be about 9:30, 10 o'clock, and I said, you better get home and open up your shop. So jumped in the car, had, a few things in the back, and I'm driving back past the Millbrook light, and I'm starting up the hill, and there's always a yard sale there, opposite where Thorns are, and I guess Frank owns the house up there, and I said, you're not running that late, you might as well stop. So I stopped, and I saw Sally, and I saw a few other people. I knew Bob Myers, and had a little bit of a conversation with a few people, and then I walked over to the table, and on the table, I saw a couple old scrapbooks. They weren't real old, like the ones you'd see from the turn of the century that would be full of trade cards or something real exciting. And I opened them up and I noticed there were some pictures of the village of Millbrook, around 1970, with some little sketches in the corners and little notations about, whose hat shop it was, or, lots of little details scribbled in. And then I turned a couple more pages, and there were some old postcards of Innisfree and some pictures of Innisfree before the house was torn down. And back when I was in high school and my early 20s, I used to mow the lawn in Innisfree for many years. So, that caught my eye. So, being in a hurry, I looked up and there was Sally. And I said, "Sally, are you selling these these scrapbooks?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, what do you want for them?" She says, "Give me a quarter." I said, "A quarter each?" And she said, "Is that too much?" I said, no problem." So I really didn't get to really delve into them. So I picked them up, handed them the 50 cents, said goodbye to everybody, and headed home. I got home, I opened up the shop, and the first thing I did is I ran in the house and saw my wife, and I said, "Brenda, you'll never guess what I found this morning. These are so neat." And we sat at the table. I didn't care if anybody came in. We started turning the pages, and there were pictures of Innisfree, like I said, and pictures of the streets, up and down Main Street of Millbrook and stuff. And then toward the back, there were these beautiful sketches done by Sally, of various homes, the churches, businesses, and not only were there the sketches, but like I said, in the columns, there were like little notations about all the history of these places. Not, things I didn't know. Things like Allen's used to be an old church. And sure enough, when you look at the pictures, you can see the long windows. You can tell it's an old church. But I never knew that. I'm very interested in Washington Hollow. There's sketches of the old fairgrounds, the old turkey farm, the old church across the way from my house. So, yeah, it was just really great. And as I was looking at him, all of a sudden a car pulled in. And it was a friend of mine, David Sloan. And he came walking up toward the house. I said, "David, you gotta come in here, you gotta see this." So he comes in, and sure enough, he turned a few more pages, and there was a picture of the Thorncrest Gatehouse. The house that we just gotten finished, refurbishing and everything, making the additions on it. And he says, "Oh, how much is that page?" And I said, "I can't sell that." You can make a copy of it if you want. So he ran out and made a copy of that, and he made a copy of Jim Cornell's house in Harts Village, because that's in Claus, and I think he probably framed that up and gave it to him. And a couple more days went by, and all of a sudden, David Greenwood shows up. So whenever I get anything really neat, especially of local interest, I always have to show it to David. So I said, "David, I've got something we'd really like to see." I brought it out and we put it on the hood of his car and we flipped it through. And Sally did a lot of sketches of all the early buildings in Harts Village, and that's David's cup of tea. So we looked at those for a while, and I said, "David, I'm really inclined to know what you do with these. I really appreciate them, but I think someday they should go to maybe the Historical Society, because it'd be a shame just to keep them in my house and look at them with my wife and kids once in a while." So Virginia came, she started coming to the shop about a year ago, and she's been back a number of times, and she had heard from David that I possess these books, and she was curious to see them one day, and I explained the same to her as I to David that they're beautiful, but I hate to see them cut up or taken apart, because it's a whole work. Sally had spent her time, her research, and I just thought they should be shared by everybody, so I give it to you.
In a way, I did take them apart, because in order to make it safe, I put each page in a little plastic binding. It is filled with history, and I was thinking that one of the hangings in the library, this history put into a guide to be handed to people who are looking at those hangings would be perfect. I'm just going to take a moment. Some of them are quite large. This is one of my favorite pages. It's the Millbrook Inn. My great uncle bought the Millbrook Inn and moved it. My sister remembers great Aunt Sarah climbing up on a ladder next to the workers that pretty much over the pier inside. So I have some memory of that building, but I did not know that it was originally the Swift Coffee Manufactory that had been remodeled. Postcard from 1907 from Nellie. I think Aunt Nellie was Nellie Coffin, who married David McKenzie. Swift Mill card, and down in small print it mentions that it's part of a series of postcards of 1873 that the government put out. So it's sending me looking for postcards again. The whole book is filled with interesting information, which I'm so glad to have. I know all of you are filled with interesting information, and I hope in the next year or so to come around and start talking to you and talking to you already. You know so many little details about these places, and these details really mustn't be lost. Something very precious Kevin gave us is this 1888 pastoral by Wallace Reuben Richards. These are poems of Millbrook, Thorndale, and courtesy of the library, I made a photocopy. This is too fragile to do anything with, because I think you'll enjoy looking inside. One question for you, Sally. One of the poems talks about being able to see the Berkshire Hills, and he titles it Leglia Towers. You know, you ever hear of a place like that? I'm going to be sure that these are here after every meeting so that all of you will have a chance to look through them. Now, David, it's going to talk to Sally, and it's up to you to get Sally out of it. All now, our town started. David really is.
First of all, let me say what a pleasure it is for me personally to be a part of this evening. Nan and I moved to Millbrook in 1984, which was really only yesterday. And yet, from the moment we arrived, we felt as if we'd come home. And it was through people like Sally and so many other wonderful folk, a lot of you are here tonight, that opened up your hearts as well as your homes to us. Sally took that quality, but went one step further. And she was able to capture in her drawings and her hard work and dedication, not only the village and its building, but the spirit of the people who live here as well. Almost every church, almost every building, almost every organization has benefited from Sally and what she's given. And that benefit, that prosperity of spirit that she so generously shares with all of us, will be shared for many generations to come. When Jimmy and I were talking about this evening, and we first thought, well, Kevin would come and give the books, and then we'd have a normal program after that. The more we talked about it, the more we realized Sally is the program. And no matter what we do, Sally is the program, because she's been there, done it, and recorded it before we ever even thought of offering it as a selection for an evening. Behind me is a throw. Many of you have seen it. It was created for the Ambulance Corps a few years ago as a fundraiser. The designs for it came from photographs, and we were involved, Sally and I were involved with picking out the images that would ultimately result in that. But every single one of them comes from one of Sally's drawings that she did for the tapestries, for the book, for the projects that she's worked on. So this isn't just the community, this is Sally's handiwork. And typical of Sally, she incorporated into the design the village and the town, because that's what Sally's all about. It's the entire hamlet, the entire family that makes this community so special. When I see this, I think of Sally. But you each, in your own way, have something that reminds you of Sally. And just looking through, we talked about the needlework. Sally's gift is visual. She She's an art major, I'm an art major. She loves to draw, I love to draw. And she's taken that skill and she's created tapestries for the Federated Church, kneelers. Look at the lovely kneeler that's here. We'll talk about these individually in a few minutes. From Grace, many of you who go to Grace recognize the handiwork. From St. Peter's, the latest project that she was involved with, a series of kneelers. We have over 100 of them now. The great bulk of them Sally did personally, by the way. This one, when I talked to Marta Green, Marta was the coordinator of the project along with Ann Collins. And Marta, who wanted to be here but had a conflict in New York, said, well, if there's one you have to bring, make sure you take the church mice. Because that's what Sally is. She's a church mouse. This is her design. Look at it. The little keepers who are there helping. Most of the designs were flowers and fruit. My wife will talk about that in a few minutes. But the mouse is her busy image of how she managed to get around here, there, and everywhere. This is the latest contribution. But every single one of them is a lasting testament to her dedication to this community. We'll talk more about it. Now, I also know the teacher in me that if I asked Sally to come up and gave her an option, she'd be very uncomfortable. But the teacher in me has the ability, the mountain and Mohammed, you know the story? If we all turn around our chairs, guess what? She did. So, Sally had an option. You either can come up and sit on a comfortable chair, or everyone else is going to turn around and look at you. That's your option. Come on. Sally and I have had so much fun talking about local history, and we each had a story, I'm sure, at least one, if not many of them. Here, take the little chair. This is perfect for you here. We each have stories about Sally and her involvement. If you think of the smallest detail, like the needlework and the designs, the intricacy of that, and the patience that went into producing hundreds of these images. I mean, we're not just talking one, we're talking hundreds. That patience on that small scale. But think of the bigger things she's done. Think of the village hall and that great chevron, that great shield that's painted on the floor. Or think of our fire engines and the images on it. Sally was there, paintbrush or needle, it didn't make any difference. She was out there doing it. So her images are so much a part of our community. We see them all the time. We take them for granted. And we forget who the creator was behind it. Well, I've got a few stories and images, but I know you have some that you'd like to share. So this is your chance to be a part of this discussion and reminisce. Now, Scott had one that he wanted very much to do, but he couldn't be here. So Allison, could you sort of paraphrase what Scott had mentioned before?
They're one of two. Which one are you?
Whichever one you'd like to throw in the hopper. This is very informal.
Well, this isn't a story right now. I'm good at making it a story. But we did want to present Sally from the Historical Society with a gift of a one-year subscription to the Millwood Roundtable. Just away from it. So, or any of the stories that may follow you. You'll be able to read about them. So this will go to that. Yeah, so, and the other thing we would like to do also is present a book to the library beginning that from Merit Bookstore. So we'll be doing that.
Now, what I am thinking of has to do with a cuckoo, I think.
I can't paraphrase that one because I don't think I was there.
Okay. Could anyone else remember the story? We were talking about it on 44A, right across from The
Oh, the Luca.
Okay. Anyone like to fill us in on what the story for the song was?
They built a road past our house, and they paved it. And then we used to sit out on the porch and after that, the mashed potato chip trucks were going through, and it was very noisy. And my mother was fuming. And I said, Mother, you're going to get a jackhammer and go out there and tear up the pavement. No. Well, I said, you're going to Albany and complain? No. Well, then I said, be quiet. So I thought, we'll fix it. So I made two signs. One said, beware wild cougar. And the other one said, elephant crossing. Nobody slowed down for the elephant crossing, and everybody slowed down for the cougar.
That's typical of Sally and her rising to the occasion, making it memorable. Any other stories that you'd care to share? Yes.
This goes back so far in the old days when the Tillsleys had the Millbrook Round Table, and you mentioned about Sally being clever with the needle and the paintbrush. She also was clever with the pen. And I loved it, Sally, when you wrote letters to the editor about people's bad manners, things that should be changed in Millbrook. And you never missed any words. And I just loved it because I was a proofreader.
I go back so far with Sally, I can't even remember life without Sally, I think. We grew up together, we played together, we partied together, we cried together, we've spent a lot of life together. But I think one of the funniest things, because I don't remember too much, anyway, but one of the funniest stories I remember was that Sally had an apartment in the village where Joe Belletri, what is the name of the architect? The Arch Architect, you know that long building that's at the very, very top of the avenue. Sally had an apartment on the second floor, and we had wonderful parties there. We used to bowl in the hall and just had a great time. Well, every winter her mom would go south, and then she would come back. And Sally's always been careful. And so before her mother came back, Sally and some of her friends would go down and clean the house and get it all ready for Mrs. Gifford to come home. And one night, we always did it at night because we worked. One night I got down there very early and I let myself in and I went upstairs to one of the floors, probably the third or the fourth floor because I know it was a long run. And I was vacuuming the bedroom. And I was vacuuming under the bed and all of a sudden I heard the doorbell ring. So I went running down 2 or 3 flights of stairs to answer the door. There was nobody there. And I did it 2 or 3 times. And I'd be vacuuming, the bell would ring, and I'd run downstairs. Well, I was really very frightened by the time I was finished because I didn't know what was going on. And finally, Sally came. And I told her that this horrible thing was happening to me. Well, little did I know that in homes like Sally's parents, there was a little button underneath the bed. And even the servants had to find him going over the bed. Ever asked me to help you but I do from the bottom of our hearts and our children's hearts and my whole family just has been so lucky to know you and we'll see you down soon.
I know Sally from way back when. I came to Millbrook when I was 4 years old. And I lived on the open floor estate, which bordered down to the Gifford property. Every Sunday afternoons, we had a beagling. And Sally, here's a picture of you beagling on Thorndale. And there's a picture of Thorndale. I have here a picture I made for you about your youth and your years that you used to be on Sunday afternoon.
Scott has just come in. Scott?
And officer arrived, not only around the afternoon, and they'll say, have a drink, and he said, well, I'm on duty. So he said, what is missing? And I said, well, his science is cocoa dessert. And I think he was Italian. He said, what's a cocoa? I said, it's usually a fiery horse in a swamp. He said, my wife is Irish. So the poor man
Wonderful. So again, another story of that great sign. An image that I will never forget of Sally is her, the teas, the very famous teas at Gifford House during their holiday celebrations. Very often Sally would be there and she'd have tea as people came in and served it as part of the ambience. And that's one of the images that I have very much of Sally in the hallway as part of that celebration. But another image that's more personal is when the village and town first decided that we would have a tour of architecture and visit different houses. We had a subcommittee. Mike Murphy actually appointed a subcommittee. And we were looking at what places could be that we could incorporate or open. And of course, Sally was involved with that. And we'd get together, Joyce Stanton was a part of it, nice group of people, and we're looking at buildings and talking about it. Every single building that we ended up showing, every single building had been drawn, gosh, how knows, many times, by Sally beforehand. So we were able to take those drawings and put them together. With having said that, in the library, those wonderful maps and hangings that document the town of Washington, which are so extraordinary. My children, when we first moved here, were quite young, and we'd gone to the library, and the library was sponsoring Santa Claus, Mr. and Mrs. Claus, and if a child wrote to Mr. and Mrs. Claus, the library guaranteed that either Mr. or Mrs. Claus would answer that child. And we had purchased the house, but we hadn't moved in yet, and we were moving in just before Christmas. And our boys were so fearful that Santa wouldn't find the house. It just wouldn't happen, because that's not where they lived. And we had given the boys' names to the library a long time, let's say October, November, whenever the project happened. And when we would come up on weekends, we'd stop at the library, look at it, and go over and visit the house. Well, as it turned out, we moved in on December 21st. The Velletris put in a mailbox for us. Guess what the first bit of mail was that we got in that mailbox? But a letter from Mrs. Claus, and she's convincing our boys that they definitely knew where we lived. So that's a very famous family story. But when we would go to the library, the boys with great pride would look at those tapestries and those maps, because there was our house on it that Sally had created years before for part of that project. And the whole town of Washington is there, those great buildings and remembrances. Kurt?
I just want to say, when I was supervisor, and we bought the Clinton Town Hall for a good price, we got all revamped, and then we had to get a warranty. So I got it through state contract, or I put it through state contract. This was done in Georgia or someplace. Well, it never came, and never came, and never came. So I called them and said, this is going to be about 48 inches. And it was not here within 48 hours on canceling the contract. So I kept thinking, who wants to get the hell to get it wrong? So when I called Sally, so she rushed over, and after drawing that mural in the bathroom, she rushed over and took me down to her log man. And we put a log in through him cheaper than state contract.
Any other stories you care to share?
Would you like to know about the quilt?
Yes.
Yeah, the library.
Yes.
Some lady, well, I don't even remember her name, I think I blotted it out. She said, well, I helped her because the county quilt, it needed a square in the town of Washington. I said, sure. And then she left town. So I thought, well, I'll make it square. I looked at it underneath the bushes. So I made a square and fell back. And then I thought, well, that's not quite fair. So I put it in the department store window and I said, I put a sign, I said, if you're not Sally O'Reilly off the door, and 9 women weren't. So they did 9 squares. And then I took the judges to Church Street and they picked my square. And so anyway, here I was with 9 squares. What was I going to do with them? So that's how that project got allowed to put them on maps.
And wonderful, wonderful solution. And that's certainly a treasure for everyone in this community. And it's on display for everyone to see. Yes?
Did Sally tell you about her balloon ride that never was?
No, not yet.
You remember that party we went to where they were giving free balloon rides over the Perkinses?
Oh, yes.
And you kept looking at it and thinking that you'd go up in it. And you remember the rope that was attached to it so that it wouldn't fly away? And, you kept looking at that rope and thinking it wasn't strong enough to hold it. And we sat on that stone wall and we just talked about the balloon and other things and we kept watching other people go up.
Yes.
David, I think we also should thank Sally for the Christmas. All of those Christmas figures you did.
Oh, yeah, when I had the apartment, I had, let's see, I had Joseph and Mary in the kitchen. I had candles in the bedroom. The wise men were all over the place.
Wonderful, wonderful stories. Yes, Marion.
One thing we should thank Sally for is she was very instrumental, I understand, in organizing the Millbrook Senior Citizens. And we're going to miss her because she's been our advisor.
That's, quote, trouble.
Wonderful cause. Lois, you had something you wanted to say too.
Yeah, I was going to mention that she's worked on Meals on Wheels for at least 8 years. She's a jack of all trades. She helped in the kitchen, she gets the drivers, she tells the jokes.
I come to hear Nancy Perkins. I come to hear Nancy Perkins blast off. Every Wednesday. You see how we
Sally, could you tell a story that I remember you telling us once? It was a time when you were responsible for seating for, I think, one of the hunt balls. And it had to do with a pair of earrings that you wore.
Oh, yes. Thorne's first wife, she said, I'll help with the whole ball. I said, sure. So in those days, they didn't have a very good invitation. So there was no way you would know who was coming. So I did the job of seating the tables. And it was up at the silver horn. Well, what an evening. 5 men attacked me. Verbally. Why were they sitting here? Or why were they sitting there? Why were they sitting with these people? And finally, Ed Davison acknowledged me, and I thought he was joking. I realized he was serious, and I thought, this is a friend. And he's really taking me apart. So I burst into tears, and I went into the ladies' room, and Bill followed me in there. And there were 2 or 3 other ladies in there. And Gail Bonnicky was in there. She was Herbert then. And she said, why didn't you tell me to shut up? And I said, what's the reason? And so anyhow, the next year I said, I'll run the phone. So this time I redid the invitation. I said, you can't come if you don't answer the invitation. And I contracted to go to the club instead of the silver home because it's only one room and nobody can be left out in one room. So then I got the catering, and then Bill said, I'll pick you up a blanket at the seaboard. So he brings me down and get it down and said, the caterer's license number. I don't know what that is. So I called up, and the girl said, oh, you have to do this. I said, well, I don't know that. We're talking like, oh, so you get that. Well, he said, it's a club. Yes, he said, well, they have a license. I said, no, they don't. Got the whole club in trouble. And he said, well, what do they do? I said, they bring in bottles. He said, that's illegal. Well, don't they have beer license? I said, I don't think so. So they were really important. So anyway, I started to cry. He told Bill later, he'd been caught and beaten when Bill was growing up. And he said, I couldn't say anything to her because my secretary would beat me. And I wanted to say, shut up and have a party. So anyway, I thought, well, I'm not going to do it. So I made 2 big cardboard earrings. And one said, I'm not your target. And the other one said something similar to that. So I was all ready to go. And in comes a guy in plain clothes. And he said, where's the band leader? He was from the union. So the band leader came out later and said, listen, this is a nice party. And I was talking in the middle.
Wonderful stories, wonderful images. Any other remembrances?
I've known Sally and Ellen and Bill since they were little kids when I was. And the Gifford place will always be the Gifford place to me. And here not too long ago, someone was asking for directions. They've been this way years ago. And the first thing I said was the Gifford home instead of the Arboretum.
That's for a lot of people. That's the association.
Sally, I wish I had a commendation for you. I didn't know about the time, so I'll get you one and mail it to you. Somebody will give me your address. I don't see anybody else here on my class. And she was here first and second year in high school together. And we will miss you in our class reunion because you always had something funny to say and always had some good humor. And we will miss your pretty smiley face. And certainly it's been a joy having you here in Millbrook. And you're just all over the place with your kneelers. I mean, after all, you say your prayers and you're kneeling on Sally.
That's why I'm leaving. There's nobody else to
Oh, no, right.
Hey, Margaret, Sally's not, she's always come back, you know.
Oh, I know. I tried to get her back for a class reunion this year, and she said, no, I'm going to be down in South Carolina, North Carolina. So, but we will miss you, and like I said, all of your beautiful needlework and your designs and your paintings. And I have one that I bought at one of the auctions here of the schoolhouse there in Lithgow, while on 44th. Yeah, the little red schoolhouse. So a lot of people have your paintings and will remember you as a congratulations on moving back with your sister, and we will miss you.
I'd just like to say something,
Yes.
David. I remember Sally back in probably the late 1970s. The Historical Society was pretty young at the time. And we went for a walk, and I can't remember exactly where we went, but it was a very warm day. And you invited us back to your house, you and Bill's house, for tea after. You didn't go on the walk because it was so warm, but we had tea after. It was the first time I ever had a cucumber sandwich. And I remember that. And it was so good after our long walk on a warm day. And then just personally, I'd like to thank you for meeting in the post office most every morning, because you always tell me a joke that I go home and tell my family. So thank you, Sally.
What we're going to do, if there's no other comment you'd like to make publicly, you want to do it personally. We've got refreshments that we'll be having in just a moment, and you'll be able to talk to Sally, you'll be able to look at the individual examples that we brought in firsthand, and there's a lot of more information that's on the back table. But at this point, I'm going to reintroduce our president, Ginny. And Ginny, you have a few last-minute remarks before we have our refreshments.
I do want to pass along some messages to you. Grace Church has many of the kneelers. You designed that room. Well, I tried to find the history of them. I had trouble because Connie Kinsey was going before them, Molly Case was going before them. I don't know whether Lucy was going to start. Doesn't have anything to do with it.
That started with the founder of the building.
Someone said,
She said, would you make some designs? I said, no, I couldn't catch it. And I went out and looked, and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. So then I kept going and going and going. But finally, when I made all the designs, it's very hard to work with a group of people. So I said, now you're going to have the designs for nothing. And we have to take them just as they are, with the colors that they have, or you can have them on the design.
and they took it. When was that, 1950, 1960, 1970? Well, I did get a hold of Donna Verrilli. Everyone said she's in Florida. So I said, well, try her number anyway. So I called her number, and she answered something about being up here because of the IRS. She said she wouldn't be here tonight, but she sent her hugs and kisses and said she would be waiting for you with open arms. She earlier, that's very nice. I do want to call on our supervisor of the town, Ken Briggs, is here this evening, brought along his wife, Betty, and you have a few words.
Yes.
Well, I don't know Millbrook without Sally O'Brien. I guess she's always been here as long as I have. And then it was Sally Gifford, and then it was Sally O'Brien, and we had Bill in our fold, and I've got to say that anything that the town or the village wanted, Sally and Bill were right there, and they led the charge. We're going to miss your jokes. My wife comes home from Moronis and ran into Sally O'Brien, and this is the latest joke. If you don't like Bill Clinton, one good thing Bill Clinton did, he made a lot of jokes for Sally to have. But the whole town and village are going to miss you. We send our love with you, and we want you to come back as often as you can. And that's about all we can do. And we thank you for all your years. Okay.
Jimmy, can I say one more thing? Sal, I was at another meeting, and I found out that Tyler turned down the fire department, the EMT, and a number of other Boy Scouts. I can't remember all the organizations. Everybody wanted to host a party for Sal, and she kept turning them down. And I said, no. So we were the only group that gets to have Sal.
Oh, we had her on Tuesday.
I know Nancy Rogers is here tonight. Did you want to say anything about when you got the hangings and where they're going to be in the new building? It's here, don't ask me when.
They were 70s, so it was right after the bicentennial, right?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know yet where they're going to be in the new building. I'm very pleased that you're in the children's room now because I see it every day. And if you haven't been to see it, by all means, please come and see it. But I would like to echo one thing that David said. You don't always appreciate it when you realize the work that's gone into it. But what's really fun is to see the kids' reaction to it. Because, again, they see a house they know, they see a building they know, and they get so excited with themselves. And Betsy Ross, too. So we really appreciate it. We feel very honored that they're there. But if you haven't seen it, by all means, come and see it. I'm sure there may be a comment place.
I just one more thing. On behalf of St. Peter's Church, I also want to thank Sally profusely for all her guidance and help in the needlework project that we did. We brought 4 of the needlers with us this evening. In addition to the church master David showed you, there's an example done by Sally of flowers, of fruits, and also seeds, acorns. But I would invite you, Sally did lots more of the kneelers, and the church is open, so I just want to extend an invitation to all of you to stop by St. Peter's and look at all the kneelers. And of course, they're the ones Sally worked on, because of the when that project finished, it took me 2 weeks to recover. 3 years of your life.
Sally, I'm curious about the needlework guild. Could you tell us a little bit about that? How it started?
I think I was, before I married Bill, before I met him, and Mrs. Partial was doing, she said to me one day, come over to the Federated Church and do a sew. I said, yes. So they were doing a green funnel for Grace Church. And she said, well, sit down and sew. It was silk and old. She said, yes, you can't even wear a dress. I said, yes. Well, she sit down. And so that stopped. And from then on, she had a little group of women who did all this. And she offered to help work in her house. And then I began to get interested in crewel. So I would draw designs. She taught me how to put them on and everything. And this went on Friday. Somebody said, you shouldn't let this just stop. So she went to England. She got Eric Wilson from the Royal School to come over. And she bought the house in the corner, Guild, and she established a school. And when Eric got out of there for about 4 or 5 years now, and when she got married, Mrs. Partial went back to England and got children in Cox. Well, then she married Mackenzie's son, and their little was marriage. Then she went back again, and she thought she was small. But she was here for a while, then she went back again. And then she went to Denmark, and she got Alva Hansen. And that was the last, when Mrs. Partial died, Alva took the title of her, so the quality would be better.
I never been aware of that.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that.
She went to Kansas City.
I do want to say something more about the hangings. Yes, Bob.
I'm glad you mentioned the Needlework Guild, because we think we have something here for you as a memento of your work that you did in it. So Sally, was that anything?
Oh, thank you.
I looked at them from the aisle in the children's room. They looked wonderful. I went in a couple of days ago, got my nose right up there, and realized many of them were paintings. Oh yes, exquisite paintings. I thought, Nancy was still here. I'm still here. Besides taking notes from the book to make a guide, there should be a picture, each one of them, colored picture. Tonight, because it should be published. Really, it's a wonderful piece of, I don't know what you call it, modern photo, but it's just absolutely.
Well, those are the ones. Now, how do we clean those?
Yes.
I said, don't touch them. When they get shabby, tear them down and throw them away.
That's where I was. We all will go, certainly once or twice or 2 times. And we know you're trying to shed yourself.
Yes.
But we're going to load you down with just a couple of more things.
Jean and Harold, you might as well both come up. Yeah. The Armstrongs. Yes.
Two arms.
Yes. Sally, I've been practicing the organ in St. Peter's, and I didn't realize you did all those boys. It took me longer to practice because I was look at all of those. The Historical Society decided last year that we would start a project transcribing Louise Tompkins's tapes. And I had to look everywhere for resources, and you were one of them. So I really appreciate the help that I got. And here is a copy of my version of Louise Tompkins' tapes and some notebook that you get. We do hope to publish this eventually, so get your checkbooks ready. I need some help. There are 52 stories. If you run out of jokes, you should get on the internet. There's a great source of jokes on the internet. And I did this on my computer. So.
Oh, you're so welcome. Very good. We all appreciate Jane's long hours working on that. It's a little bit of
Oh, yes, and if you're good at proofreading, Edwin and I can use all the help we can get. Just give me a call if you find a mistake.
Harold?
Well, Sally here is she's one of our early members of the Historical Society. And she was our first treasurer, if I remember right. And we're still using that little book that she gave us to keep her records. She cut out, I don't know what was in the book, but she cut out maybe 11 pages, and we're using the remaining of the books for our Now then, we have a certificate here for Sally. Certificate of membership to Sally O'Brien in recognition of her service to the town of Washington Historical Society. Life membership.
And Sally wants all of you who are not members to join tonight.
Yes, everyone who would like to join Harold is right back there with the little notebook. Nikki?
Yes, the Mike Milbert will send a calendar every year this time.
The Mayor Bookstore is going to send her a joke calendar.
I think, unless there anyone, is there anyone else with a surprise gift? I'm going to go. You're going back yet. We don't want you to forget us. We hope to have a few notes from you, so I ran off a few of your etchings in little note cards, what they need before you send them to a friend, your own handwriting, the name of it, and the way we did it, and some of them have your SOB and others don't. Are you going to get that license plate down there?
Why not till the Sabbath ready for that?
I only guess it's an SOB. What's the plate? SOB1. Folks, I appreciate, I'm sure Sally does, all of you for coming this evening. We do have coffee and tea and lemonade. And hope we will spend a few moments visiting. The notebooks are up here. We'd like to look at them. So we are adjourned.